Bo has had some significant changes in Monster Hunter Wilds from previous titles. In this video, we're going to break down the basics and lay out the bread and butter combos that you should be trying to do. Now, the first thing you need to realize with bow is something called critical range. So whenever you have your bow out and in the wild and you're aiming it, your reticle will look like this. It's just kind of silver and laid out and whatnot when you're aiming at nothing. When you're aiming at something, you can actually see where it says out of range. Now, what critical range is, when you're at a certain distance, you will do a lot less damage than when you're in critical range. When this lights up orange, like so, this is critical range. This is something that newer players to bow need to understand 100%. You need to understand exactly how far you need to be from a monster or a target and still be within critical range. Now, this goes both ways. If you're too close, you'll see that it actually goes away. But if you're at the right distance, from there to roughly here, that is the critical range. Now, it's a good distance, so you're not going to be, you know, really super close to the enemy, but you can see the damage difference from right here. If we shoot right here, that's a charge 1, that's 7 and 7. So it's pretty good when you're in critical range, but when you're in melee range, for example, doing 6. Now, this adds up over time. Now, let's say we're really far away and try to shoot something. You can notice, well, one, I'm just missing flat out, but the damage is a lot lower whenever you're farther away from your target. As you can see there, we're hitting for 7s, but mostly hitting for 1s and whatnot. And these are critical hits as well, so hitting in the head, etc., etc. So something you need to keep in mind 100% is your critical range. Now, outside of that, we need to pay attention to what's down here in the bottom right as I'm hovering over it. This is called the bow gauge. Now, this charge gauge in the bottom right is filled via attacking or just holding down charge. You can also fill this with perfect dodging. If enemy is about to hit you and you actually dodge through the attack, it's considered a perfect dodge. That will do two things. That'll refill a big portion of this gauge and it'll give you a load of stamina back. So understanding perfect dodge and how to do it it's paramount to playing bow properly. This gauge over here, this is used for a handful of things. It's used for coatings, which are now infinite. And they have a charge number. As you can see, this power coating is 0 out of 8. But used to, these were like consumables and stuff. Now, pretty much every time you equip a coating, which is done by holding down or hitting Y, that will equip a coating. Now we're 8 out of 8. We're going to be doing more damage for 8 shots. So something you need to keep in mind here, every time those 8 shots are done, you're going to have to re-equip that coating, or it's, you know, you're just going to do less damage overall. So that's something you need to keep inside of your rotation. Start to understand it, but it's literally just hitting Y with your bow out. You'll re-equip 8 coatings. And you can see even right here underneath your aiming reticle, you can see how many you have currently. On top of that, there's something else that you can start using with this gauge here called tracer arrows. Now, tracer arrows are amazing. They're actually equipped via using R2 and square. So we'll use it. I think we can use that on some of these enemies. So if we shoot something with a tracer, yeah. So you can see this. Now, if you are terrible at aiming like me, and you have a tracer arrow equipped, these last about 10 seconds, by the way, things start to home in. Like I said, it only lasts about 10 seconds, but as you can see, shaboom, shebang. And it does a lot of damage. And by a lot, I mean like this is nearly double your damage. So, for example, regular shots in critical range here, and this is going to be a level 3 charge, 777. Now let's stick a tracer arrow on there and see what we got. Suddenly, we do 13. Like I said, nearly double the damage on this. Now, this does take into effect where you hit the monster at with the tracer arrow. If you hit a monster in a weak point with a tracer arrow, all of your shots are going to be doing orange damage, or like the best damage you can do. And if you hit them in the foot with a tracer arrow, all of those subsequent shots are going to be shooting in the foot, so you won't be doing as much damage. Something else to keep in mind. On top of that, you can also shoot a maximum amount of arrows while not fully charged with this. What I mean by that, we'll get into this a bit more during the play style, but what I mean by that is when you shoot 1, 2, 3, you'll notice we're shooting 1 arrow, 2 arrow, 3 arrows, right? So if we go 1, 2, 3, you can see right there how it charges up. With tracers, you shoot a tracer into an enemy, 1 shot, 3 arrows. 3 arrows. Get out of the way, bird. 3 arrow. Get out of the way, thing. Everything is triple shot, so everything's essentially maxed. That's why tracer arrows are of the utmost important when playing a bow. This is going to increase your damage by an immense amount, and you need to try your best to keep these up. Now, we're going to dive into the play style a little bit. So now we're going to be going through play style. Now, throughout playing, generally your goal is going to be to maintain high-level shots. Every third basic shot is a triple shot, and we'll showcase this with our 2 here. So 1, 2, 3 arrows. You can maintain this power level by dodging. So essentially, if you don't dodge, you're going to be doing 1, 2, 3, and then it starts all over again. 1, 2, 3. But if you dodge, 3, 3, 3. Pay attention to your stamina during this time, because your stamina is taking a huge hit right here. Every time you dodge and maintain that triple shot, it's going to use up a lot of stamina. This is where the resource management comes in for bow. You have a lot of things to pay attention to, okay? So you have to pay attention to your stamina for 1. You have to pay attention to your bow gauge for 2, and your tracer arrow timings, which is roughly 10 seconds, I believe. And then you also have to pay attention to your coatings. You can swap through your coatings, by the way. I forgot to mention this earlier, by holding down L1 and using triangle or X to go up and down. Now, this is a lot to keep up with at first, but once you get adjusted to doing it, I'm not that great at it yet. I'm kind of new to bow myself, but once you get used to doing that, it flows really well. It's not even really that bad. Now, as I was saying earlier about tracer arrows being amazing, and you have to keep with those like roughly every 10 seconds. There's another thing that's really amazing called fuse arrows. Now, if we can find ourselves a batch of enemies, we're going to run over and start using fuse arrows. Fuse arrows come from essentially using arc shot. So arc shot is an ability that if you hold down your right trigger with the bow equipped, you can see it right there. L2 and circle is arc shot. So what does arc shot do? Well, it gives you this little area of effect. Uh-oh. Alligator or something. You fire this off, and it's going to start sticking enemies with these fuses. So fuse arrows, your new fancy L2 magic archer type ability, which basically is tracking. You can hold down L2 and hit R1, and you can notice these little reticles pop up. This is all tracing. So what I mean by that, or all tracking, I should say, every time you line that reticle up, you're going to notice, we'll fire off another arc shot just to kind of get you to understand here. So if we stick something with all this, and they have these little fuses in the back, and we hold down L2 and press R1, see all those little reticles that are adding up to 3, like makes a little triangle right there? That's the amount of arrows you're firing off right there. Pretty good damage overall. Also causes the fire effect on the ground, which does hurt you, by the way. Be mindful of that. Now, again, we're going to touch one more time on tracer arrows. Like I said, we touched on this a few times already, but they are so important to your damage that it needs to be mentioned over and over again. Roughly every 10 seconds between bouncing around and keeping high-level charge shots and your power coatings up, you need to be reapplying this tracer shot, because it's that important to your damage. It just adds up immensely, also giving you tracking, so you don't really have to aim. You know, it's one less thing to look forward to, is to aiming your actual bow. But just pay attention for those things. Now, some other abilities you can do. Flying Swallow is one after a charge step if you press dodge and I believe triangle. We'll do it right now. We do a charge step, dodge, triangle. That will get you out of the way of something. So hypothetically speaking, let's say you're in the middle of a fight. You do a dodge too early. Uh-oh, hit triangle so you can actually get out of the way of it. If you're trying to do a perfect dodge and you mistimed it and you did it early, if you hit triangle, that gives you a little bit more of a jump to get out of danger. So just something to keep in mind. It's in your utility box to use if you need it. There's also Dragon Piercer. Dragon Piercer is a great tool for monsters that are on the bigger side. So things that are longer or wider. You can use this via tapping triangle and circle. Now, you have to be mindful of using this. It's not the greatest thing in the world to use. It's kind of a noob trap as well. But the longer the target, the more hits that it's going to do, because it actually pierces the enemy and you do subsequent hits as it goes through the enemy. Not a bad thing to use, but I definitely see a lot of newer bow players kind of spamming that ability. You don't want to do that. Just be mindful of it. Now, at the cost of sounding a bit redundant here, we're going to go over the basic combos of how to basically use bow. You have to have coatings applied and tracers up as much as possible. After applying a coating and a tracer, try to target a weak point again, so you do that orange damage with your tracer. You fire off your basic combo. Basic combo is essentially R2, 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 circle, dodge, R2, circle, dodge, R2, circle. If you have the stamina, you can keep doing this. We're going to go ahead and get our stamina right back up just to showcase it and make sure I know what I'm doing here. But essentially, you're going to be keeping your upkeep with your charge shots, like I said. Now, look at this. 1, 2, 3, circle, dodge, R2, circle, dodge, R2, circle, dodge. And like I said, if you got stamina, you can keep that going. You're going to be incorporating this with enemy attacks, so you get perfect dodges and things like that. But you will inevitably fire off so many shots that your coatings are going to be off. So whenever your coatings are off, you're going to want to replenish those. Whenever your tracer is off every 10 seconds, you're going to want to replace that. Now, on downed monsters, for instance, you're going to be using downed monsters or monsters with multiple weak points. You can fire off your arc shot to apply some fuse arrows. Hit a tracer arrow, then do a hailstorm for some nice fancy damage. Hailstorm is also used to destroy weak points, but also targets fuse arrows and such. Make sure you hold the reticle over the targets long enough so that you get all of the arrows off. There's 3 per target. You'll notice like the little triangle again. Very fun ability. Well, with that, that's kind of all there is to bow. I mean, there's a lot there. It is kind of a bit more complicated, a bit more upkeep, but that's the basic guide to bow. Ranged weapons are my personal weak point in Monster Hunter games, and I typically just enjoy melee combat. But bow is something I'm definitely going to be diving into with Wilds. The playstyle's been super fun in the beta, and it's about time I kind of broaden my horizons a little bit. There's more to bow, but I hope this basics guide is enough to get you started with bow and kind of give you a basic understanding. Now, every week I'm going to be releasing, up until the release date of Monster Hunter Wilds, I'll be releasing a basics guide for a different weapon until the game releases on February 28th. If you would like more, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're going to be posting more Monster Hunter content, short form and long form, on the channel for a while to come. Thank you for watching. Good luck on the hunts.